What's up, everybody? Me, PJ, back again with another album review. Today I'm going to be talking about the fourth album from the band Exmortus, which just came out this past Friday the 8th via Prosthetic Records. Exmortus is a band based out of Southern California, and their style incorporates elements of old school metal. You've got elements of 80s thrash, old school death metal, as well as a very strong neoclassical influence, and even a classical influence in some spots, specifically Beethoven, who they have done reworkings of on their past two albums. My introduction to Exmortus was their 2014 Prosthetic Records debut, Slave to the Sword. Now, that album had a huge wow factor for me. When I put it on, I was just amazed, very gripped throughout the whole record. I hadn't really heard anything too similar to it. I've heard stuff similar to the different elements they combine, but I hadn't heard all of that put together in one place. I really loved it. It's a great metal record. If you haven't heard it, I would definitely recommend checking it out before listening to Ride Forth. Now, because of my love for their last album, Slave to the Sword, I was definitely looking forward to the follow-up. Now, before this album was released back in last September of 2015, we got the single For the Horde, and that was a very good showcase of what this band can do. It really showcased their more thrashy elements. There was a little more emphasis on the thrashy riffs rather than the soloing and the leads, but I did think it was a pretty good representation of what this band can do. Now, here we are in 2016. Ride Forth has been released. It's 9 tracks, and these 9 tracks to me really showcase their more thrashy side. The technicality, I feel, was a bit toned back from what we got on the last album. However, this does start off really strongly. The first two songs, Speed of the Strike and Relentless, were a great way to kick off the album. Speed of the Strike just enters with a very neoclassical flavored lead. The bass as well is very technical in this song. I like this track quite a bit, and it really reminded me of how Slave to the Sword started out with a very lead heavy song, and this was definitely a good intro to the album. Relentless was a bit less technical, but very, very heavy and very catchy as well. After that, we have For the Horde, which we've already listened to prior to this release. Now, after For the Horde, tracks 4 through 6 really didn't stick out that much to me. I felt like there was not a very big emphasis on the leads and more emphasis on a bit of repetitive thrash metal, which I really do not enjoy from this band. I think they really shine when they let the leads do their thing, but I felt like it was just thrash for thrash metal's sake, and I wasn't too into that. However, after this low point, we do have one of the best tracks on the album, which is a reworking of part of Beethoven's Appassionata. And this is very, very well done. The guitars and bass are both extremely technical on this. The drums fit in very well. And I thought as a whole, this song was really well pulled off. And honestly, it's probably the highlight of the back half of the album. After Appassionata, this album closes out with 2 tracks. We have Death to Tyrants and Fire and Ice. Both of these are quite memorable in my opinion. Death to Tyrants more so than Fire and Ice. Definitely picks the album back up for a good finish. In general, this record has very pristine production as well as very tight playing from all members involved, and that really lends itself to making a cohesive end product. As far as the individual instruments go, the guitars sound very, very good, very precise playing. The leads are very technical when they get like that. There's some awesome soloing that just brings back old school classic solos from the 80s, which was freaking awesome. However, when the guitars do more thrashy things like just riffing, I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of variation during those parts, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. As for the bass playing, it's very audible, very technical throughout, I would say. And during the guitar leads, the bass is the one responsible for keeping the mix very heavy. And if you're listening on a system that has really bad bass, the mix does feel a bit hollow. So when you listen to this, make sure you have good bass on whatever system you're using to listen to this, or you have good headphones that do bass properly. Because if not, this album might sound a little hollow to you. So definitely keep that in mind when you approach it. The drums are very technical, very precise like the other instruments, and they fit very well in with the guitars and bass, which I feel like were the main focus of the music. As for the vocals, like previous Exmortus albums, there's not a ton of variation. There are hints of clean vocals here and there. Like in the song For the Horde, you get some hints of like maybe some cleans, but there's never any like full-fledged cleans, and I felt like the vocals were a little bit monotonous sometimes, but they are very old school death metal inspired in my opinion. So if you like that, you should definitely check this out. In conclusion, I thought this was a very good album. Not my favorite from this band. I think their last album, Slave to the Sword, was much better, and it kept my interest throughout better than this album did. And I did feel like that rough patch in the middle kind of hurt this album, in my opinion. This album is very much worth your time. However, I would recommend checking out their last album before this one if you haven't heard either. So, as a total score, I'd probably give Ride Forth a 7 out of 10. It's got some very solid musicianship. I just felt like some of the songwriting could have been better. But anyways, that's just my opinion. Now, I'll link you to their Bandcamp page where you can currently stream this album, as well as pick it up digitally, physically, as well as pick up some cool merch like shirts and such while you're at it. Now, that's all for this review. If you've heard this album, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. And as always, keep it metal.